Hi, I'm Mark and welcome to another lesson with Master Everyday English. Today we're going to focus on a very important thing that you need to know if you're traveling to the United States from a different country. Now what I'm talking about is completing a customs declaration form. A customs declaration form is the form that you complete normally on the airplane when you're traveling to the United States. It basically has two separate parts. A part where you talk about the things of monetary value, the things that are worth money that you're bringing into the country, and a second part where you talk about anything else that you might bring into the country, things like plants or foods or soil. So let's get right into this. I'm going to show you a customs declaration form, and we're going to read through the customs declaration form together. I'm going to explain any difficult vocabulary. And I'm also going to describe exactly what you need to do to complete the form. So let's look at the first part together. This is the customs declaration. So I'll read it for you and then we'll look at any of that kind of difficult vocabulary together. So the first part starts. Each arriving traveler or responsible family member must provide the following information. Only one written declaration per family is required. Okay, so basically you're going to have one of these forms to complete for your family. So not every person in your group or in your family, but just one per family. And it says the term family is defined as members of a family residing in the same household who are related by blood, marriage, domestic relationship, or adoption. Okay, so the term family, right? So that's what we're talking so if you're going to fill out one per family, it's important to know what they mean by a family. That's anybody related by blood, so your children or your parents. Marriage, of course, your husband or your wife. And a domestic relationship. So what do we mean by domestic relationship? Domestic relationship, we mean that you're living together. Okay, so you're living together in a house. Maybe you're a boyfriend-girlfriend, or you're a family that shares the same household, so you have the same address. Or adoption. So what do we mean by adoption? Basically means that you are the legal parent or guardian of another person's child. Now let's look at the individual parts of the declaration form that you need to complete. The first part is your family name. So that's your last name. You also need to give your first name. They say first or given. Basically means the same thing, just your first name. And your middle name. If you have a middle name, then you put down the full middle name, not just the letter. Number 2, you need to give your birth date, your date of birth. Now remember, in the United States, we have the month first, then the day, then the year. I know in other countries, in the UK for example, it's the day, month, year, but here in the United States, it's month, day, year. Then because we said this form is for all of your family, you need to put how many members of your family they are. Now this is not including you, okay? So you need to put down all of the other people you are traveling with in your family. Number 4 is your US street address, your hotel name or your destination. So you need to tell Customs and Border Protection exactly where you're staying. So if you're staying at a hotel, put down the address for the hotel. If you're staying with friends, the address from your friends. If it's an Airbnb, the address from the Airbnb, wherever it is you're staying. Number 5, passport issued by, and then country. So you just need to write down the name of the country that you have your passport from. Number 6 is your passport number. So in every passport there is a passport number. You find it here. And so you just open your passport and copy the number from your passport. Country of residence. So the country of residence is where you live. So of course, this might be different from the country of issue for your passport. Let's say, for example, you're from Honduras, but you live in Mexico, then Mexico is the country of residence. That's where you live. Number 8, countries visited on this trip prior to US arrival. So we've got countries visited, so the other countries you visited, and it says prior. What do we mean by prior? Prior just means before. So on your trip, what countries did you visit before you came to the United States? Number 9 is your airline or your flight number or your vessel name. So of course, your flight number is you can find that on your boarding pass. The vessel name, well, what do we mean by vessel? A vessel is normally a boat or a ship. So this would be maybe if you came on a cruise ship or something, maybe from Canada or the Caribbean, I'm not sure. But that would be the name of the ship. Now, numbers 10 through 14 are yes/no questions. That means you need to tick either yes or no. Number 10, the primary purpose of this trip is business. So if you've come to the United States for work. Number 11, I am or we are bringing. Now this is where they want to know about the things you're bringing into the country. So letter A says fruits, vegetables, plants, seeds, food, and insects. Letter B is meat, animals, animal or wildlife products. Again, this idea that if you're bringing in animals that are not native to the United States or food that's not native to the United States, it could create problems. Letter C, it says disease agents, cell cultures, and snails. Snails, I don't know. Letter D, it says soil. Soil is the dirt or the earth. Of course, this is probably connected to farming, and so it says, or have been on a farm, a ranch, or a pasture. Number 12 says, I have, or we have, been in close proximity of livestock. So the first part, proximity just means you've been near, and it says livestock. Now by livestock, we mean basically animals on a farm, cows, pigs, sheep, chickens, any of the animals that you'd find on a farm. Number 13, I am, or we are, carrying currency or monetary instruments. So currency is your cash, right, your dollars. What we mean by monetary instruments here are the things you can exchange for cash. So things like checks or traveler's checks or stocks, bonds, basically anything that you can exchange for money. So I'm carrying currency or monetary instruments over 10,000 US dollars or the foreign equivalent. So let's say, for example, you were bringing euros. It would be how much is the equivalent or how much is the same amount of $10,000 in euros. So that word equivalent just means the same. Number 14, I have, or we have, Commercial merchandise, articles for sale, samples used for soliciting orders, or goods that are not considered personal effects. So when we say commercial merchandise, that's exactly what we mean. Something that you want to sell to other people, right? So you want to publicly sell things to other people. And again, for each of these questions, you're going to choose yes or you're going to choose no. Number 15, residents. By residents, as I said at the beginning, residents are people living in a country. So if you're a resident in the United States, it means you live here normally. And 15, it says the total value of all goods, including commercial merchandise that I or we have purchased or acquired abroad, including gifts for someone else, but not items mailed to the US. And I am bringing into the US is, so here, again, they want to know if you're bringing something into the country that you want to sell, how much is it worth? And they also want to know if you have bought something expensive in another country, maybe you were in Italy and you went and bought some Gucci and some Prada and some different products that were very expensive, how much did they cost? Then it says for visitors, the total value of all articles that will remain in the US. We say remain, it means that they're going to stay here. They're going to stay in the United States. Or you're going to leave them in the United States. Including commercial merchandise is. And that's the same idea, basically, that anything that you're bringing to the United States if you're a visitor, but you plan to either sell it here or you're going to leave it here. If it's a gift, again, an expensive gift or something, how much is it worth? And at the bottom here, you can see you have to put your signature, right? So you're writing your name and the date. Remember, in the United States, month, day, year. When you turn over the form, on the back side of the form, it looks like this. And it starts. U.S. Customs and Border Protection welcomes you to the United States. U.S. Customs and Border Protection is responsible for protecting the United States against the illegal importation of prohibited goods. Right? So they want to stop anything illegal coming into the country. CBP, that's Customs Border Protection, officers have the authority to question you and examine you and your personal property. So they can look in your bags, they can check your pockets. If you are one of the travelers selected for an examination, you will be treated in a courteous, professional, and dignified manner. So what they're saying is that if they have to examine you and your bags, that they'll do this in an honest and a friendly and then basically a nice way. CBP supervisors and passenger service representatives are available to answer your questions. Comment cards are available to compliment or provide feedback. So if there are any problems, then you can speak to the supervisors or the passenger service representatives, and you can also give feedback, right? You can tell them what the problem was. The next part, important information. It says US residents declare all articles that you have acquired abroad and are bringing into the United States. So you have to tell them, you have to declare that you have acquired, you bought something or you have gifts from abroad, from another country. Visitors, non-residents, you have to declare the value of all articles that will remain in the United States. As we said, to remain is to stay or to leave them in the United States. The next part, it says, declare all articles on this declaration form and show the value in US dollars. For gifts, please indicate the retail value. Retail value is if I want to go and buy this gift, how much will it cost? The next part is the duty. So CBP officers will determine duty. And what do we mean by duty? We mean tax, basically, how much money in tax you need to pay. US residents are normally entitled to a duty-free exemption. An exemption means that you don't have to pay something. So the exemption, what you don't have to pay, is $800 on items accompanying them. Visitors, non-residents, are normally entitled to an exemption of $100. So the limit for visitors is obviously it's a lot less than it is for residents. It says duty will be assessed at the current rate on the first $1,000 above the exemption. So you have your exemption, $800, and then the amount of tax they're going to charge you will be calculated on the first $1,000 after either that $800 or the $100. All right, the next section, agriculture and wildlife products. To prevent the entry of dangerous agricultural pests, we mean insects that maybe can destroy plants, right? That's what we mean by a pest. And prohibited wildlife. The following are restricted: fruits, vegetables, plants, plant products, soil, meat, meat products, birds, snails, and other live animals or animal products, right? So like we said, animals, plants, you can't bring them in from your country. Failure to declare such items to the Customs and Border Protection Officer or the Customs and Border Protection Agricultural Specialist, Fish and Wildlife Inspector, right? So those are the different people who are checking these customs forms, can result in penalties. So it can result in, what would we say, a penalty. That could be either a fine, so money you have to pay, or if it's something very, very serious, it could even be a prison sentence. And the items may be subject to seizure. Subject to seizure means they're going to take them from you. That's what we mean by subject to seizure. Take away from you. It says controlled substances, obscene articles, and toxic substances are generally prohibited entry. So controlled substances, we normally mean drugs. Obscene articles, that's normally sexual or offensive books or pictures. And toxic substances, basically any dangerous chemicals. The importation of merchandise into the US that infringes, we said infringes means to break the law, infringes intellectual property rights may subject travelers to civil or criminal penalties and may pose serious risk to safety or health. So it may pose something. When we say we pose something, we mean it makes it or it creates it. So it can create a serious risk, right? A serious problem for someone's safety or someone's health. Now we have, the next part is a repeat of the front page where we had to talk a little bit about the things we're bringing into the country and how much they're worth or the money we're bringing into the country. And so it starts. The transportation of currency or monetary instruments, regardless of the amount, is legal, right? So you can bring as much money into the country as you like. However, if you bring into or take out of the United States more than $10,000, right, or the foreign equivalent, or a combination of both, you are required by law to file a report on FINCEN 105, formerly Customs Form 4790. Monetary instruments include coin, currency, traveler's checks, and bearer instruments such as personal or cashier's checks and stocks and bonds. Like we said, anything that you can transfer into money. If you have someone else carry the currency or monetary instrument for you, you must also file a report on FINCEN 105. Failure to file the required report or failure to report the total amount that you are carrying may lead to the seizure of all the currency or monetary instruments. Okay, so if you don't tell them, they can seize, they can take it away. And may subject you to civil penalties and or criminal prosecution. Sign on the opposite side of this form after you have read the important information above and made a truthful declaration. Okay, so you're telling the truth about how much the things are worth. Okay, so here it says the description of the articles. So for example, if you bought a nice watch, a Rolex or something, as a gift for a friend in the United States or a family member in the United States, you're going to write that down, right? Rolex, gold Rolex watch. You put down the value, right? How much is it worth? Remember, they want to know the retail value. How much can you buy it for? This is the same for any expensive clothes or basically any expensive gifts that you have. Of course, we're not talking about small things like t-shirts or anything like that. We're talking about the more expensive things that you're bringing into the country as gifts, or if you're traveling in a business sense, then any of the things that you want to try and sell commercially. So at the bottom, you're going to put the total, and that means basically how much altogether this stuff is worth. And that's it. So now we've looked at the customs declaration form in detail. We've looked at each of the individual parts, what exactly each part means, and how you complete the form. I'll put a link to the website, the Customs and Border Protection website, where you can actually download a copy of this form if you want to. And I'll also put a link to a little vocabulary list that I put together for you. I'll put that in the description box as well. If you want some more practice with the kind of vocabulary, phrases and expressions that you can expect to hear when you're traveling through an airport in the United States, go to my website, Master Everyday English. I'll also put a link in the description box below. You can find some activity sheets to download. I also have an activity workbook that you can buy there. So yeah, go check it out.